Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian he never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out.
Zoran Zaev continues his own personal Don Quixote adventure chasing windmills, or, in his case, pleading with European powers to recognize him as quote-unquote a great man and give Macedonia a date to start EU accession talks. Or, as Zaev might put it another way, I'm too sexy for myself, too sexy for Merkel, too sexy for Macron. Meanwhile, his government continues selling Macedonia down the proverbial river, as next-door Bulgaria continues to demand that Macedonia recognize Goce Delchev as Bulgarian. This led to the U.S. Embassy stage stunt in which Tamara Todevska sang the Macedonian national anthem, but left out Goce Delchev, along with Pitu Guli, Tami Gruev, and Jane Sandansky, leading many to accuse the U.S. bureaucrats of arranging it, which of course they did because they are U.S. bureaucrats who believe in their own personal interests, not U.S. interests. The U.S. Embassy issued a non-apology apology, which was then ratioed on Twitter. Speaking of the U.S., Zaev's government now apparently arrests U.S. citizens, as it did recently with Professor Nestor Oganar, for insisting that Macedonia is, well, Macedonia. And then there were Greek elections with Zoran Zaev's new best friend forever, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, becoming the new Greek prime minister. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin and calling in from the ancient Sumerian capital of Skopje in Macedonia.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's been a few weeks since we recorded an actual podcast. I know we had that special edition with the tourism podcast, which I hope listeners enjoyed, talking about the beauties of Macedonia and things to do and our favorite places to go and other things. But it's been a while, Cvetin, since we've talked about politics, and there is just so much going on. That intro was just kind of a taste of things that, random, but I don't even know where to begin, frankly.
That was just the last 15 minutes.
Indeed. So I don't know. Where do you want to start? Let's see. Let's start because it's a big thing on social media today with the Russian comedian's prank of Zoran Zaev, and Zaev thinking that he actually was talking to Stoltenberg and the Ukrainian president and others. What bring us up to date on that, because it's there's so much going on with that, and he's getting ridiculed on social media and even amongst the so-called colorful revolutionaries and other supporters of his. What's the latest?
Well, these guys, they do this all the time to all sorts of politicians, especially those who cross Russia. And apparently they've been doing this. Apparently they've never been so successful as with Zaev, because they actually prank him 3 times. So if you listen to their attempt to Macron, through the Russian embassy, I guess you can get the phone number of Emmanuel Macron and you can call him once, but then it's a completely different matter if the subject you're trying to prank actually answers your calls 3 times in a row and speaks to you for a full hour. And Zaev is, in these conversations, they're well prepared. They're getting Zaev on... they know what he's doing. They're offering him business deals, like they're pretending to be Petro Poroshenko, and they're offering him a business deal because he does similar business to Zaev's business, and you can just see his eyes light up and doing the ka-ching sound in the background. So the guys were well prepared. They asked him, and he answered truthfully about German plans regarding the Balkans, border changes. With regard to, you can basically see that Zaev is scared witless, that there is a danger that Russia and that Serbia and Kosovo will withdraw their borders, and he keeps coming up with reasons why this shouldn't be done. He mentions, this is going to cause trouble in Cyprus. Turkey will take over northern Cyprus. Russia will take Georgia and Abkhazia. But in reality, he's scared that his little attempt here to create something like a multi-ethnic, even Albanian-run Macedonia is going to collapse as soon as some actual hard power comes to the starts redrawing the borders in the Balkans, and that we're going to have a big mess in Macedonia, which is something that we have been warning about all the time here in this podcast. And then the guys they make a few jokes, like they're telling Zaev that Ukrainians are Sumerians, and that Alexander ruled Sumeria, and that the guy who's pretending he's Petro Poroshenko says, "You can call me Peter of Macedonia, and I'm going to rename Ukraine into Eastern Macedonia." And Zaev still doesn't get it that he's being pranked, and apparently he only realized yesterday evening with the rest of us. So that's the funniest part.
Right. So there's that he only realized it yesterday. You said 3 times, and obviously Poroshenko has not been president of Ukraine for a while. They had elections recently, so this all occurred in the past.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the issue of, how does that even, from a technical standpoint, Zaev doesn't just get on the phone and call them, or they don't just get on the phone and call him, and had to go through his advisors. And he's got like 55,000 advisors or something like that.
Yeah.
And obviously they are providing him with crap advice if they fell for this as well. So there's that. And then Zaev is handing out the personal cell phone numbers for world leaders. I mean, I don't even do that. If somebody asks me for your cell phone, Cvetin, I'm gonna ask you first. Do you mind if I give your cell phone to so and so? But Zaev is just giving this away like candy. It's what an idiot.
Yeah, it's glorious. But and I'm hopeful that that they're not publishing the entire material, that they have something held in reserve for as he's denying.
But wait, there's more. So
I'm pretty hopeful there is, because no way that he would not go into details when he's discussing a possible business deal or this other criminal, essentially. He has actually 2 criminal comments in the recording. In one of them, he says, the Poroshenko, making air quotes, tells him, well, listen, we're also going to have to hold a referendum on NATO. You're holding a referendum in a few days. Well, but and it's not popular in Ukraine, but as a politician, our politician once said, he's quoting Stalin, it doesn't matter who votes or how the people vote. It's important who counts the votes. And he tells and the Joker tells Zaev, and Zaev doesn't get the reference. Obviously, he's illiterate politically, and the Joker tells him, you can use this reference in your referendum. This can become useful for you in a few days. And Zaev says, yes, for sure. So he's essentially agreeing that he's going to rig the referendum, which he did.
Wow.
They tried to
rig
it.
That gives us a timeline then. That gives us a timeline. This happened way back in September then.
Oh no, the Russian guys, they gave the dates. It's August 2018, January 2019, and then April 2019. Zaev actually talked that he's talking to Poroshenko literally the day before his election. Like Poroshenko would have time for Zaev in this situation. I mean, it's that alone should have been a giveaway. And then the guys, because they don't like Wes Mitchell, they don't like Geoffrey Piat, the American diplomats involved in Ukraine and Macedonia. They don't like the Patriarch Vartolomei from Constantinople, from Istanbul, who actually is essentially doing the U.S. bidding here and recognized the Ukrainian church as separate from the Russian church. So they essentially, the guy who is pretending to be Poroshenko tells Zaev, listen, I got this deal wrapped up for my church, for the Ukrainian church. You have a similar problem with the Macedonian church. They don't want to, you want to have the Macedonian church recognized. I got mine recognized through Vartolomei. All I had to do was give him 100,000 euros. Actually, I gave him 150, but we are making a package deal. So I told him that if he recognizes the Macedonian church as well, I'll give him 100 more. Or essentially, you, Zaev, will give Vartolomei 100 more. And Zaev says, yes, no problem, money from my account, don't worry, it can be done. It's like, I don't know what to say. I mean, people are cringing all day long. And this is Zaev who actually was asking a businessman for a bribe, telling him to donate the money to the church in Strumica, which is apparently used as a front to launder money big to Zaev. You come as a businessman, donate money to the church, then the bishop, understands that he's not going to be audited, so he just gives, he keeps maybe 10% and gives the rest to Zaev. I don't know how that works exactly, but
Right.
it's pretty clear that Zaev is in this frame of mind. He's not shocked when he is told you should leave money with the Patriarch of Constantinople. He may be shocked that the sum is so small, but he says,
Right.
no problem, 100,000, it's a bargain.
Yeah, chump change for him.
My God.
Wow. Well, frankly, and given the outpouring of anger and ridicule on social media and in the media there in Macedonia and elsewhere over Zaev's antics and the fact that he fell for this, etc., I think I got 2 points. Number one, it is part of this overall trend in the West and in the world to say that there's no truth, there's no objective truth, and to believe just about anything. And so I think that's why partly he fell for it, because there's no truth anymore. Nobody believes in it. Number two, I think that the West, quote unquote, will this is just another quote brick in the wall, so to speak, of where the West will say, okay, this guy really is an idiot. He's done our bidding. Macedonia's going to be in NATO. Macedonia's not going to be in the European Union anytime in the next decade, and so it's time to say goodbye. And they'll drop him like a bad habit soon. And he's not going to have the support that he thinks he has. He thinks he's a great man. He goes to Merkel and Macron and others and says, look at what we've done. They won't. These people, these European Union leaders, won't be able to resist the great things that I have done as Prime Minister of Macedonia. They will be blinded by the work that we have done in changing Macedonia's name and identity, etc., and will openly accept us into the European Union immediately. But that's just not going to happen. He's delusional, and I think this is just another brick in the wall for his towards his demise.
Well, I guess Tsipras was hoping the same, and look where that got.
Well, that's a good transition. Let's talk about Zaev's new best friend forever, Kyriakos Mitsotakis, who became the new Greek Prime Minister. I guess yesterday was sworn in. We're recording this, I should say, on what is today? Tuesday, July 9. So the Greek elections were on Sunday, July 7. As predicted, as advertised, New Democracy won big time in Greece. And so the leader of New Democracy is now the Prime Minister. Alexis Tsipras, the darling of the international crowd, is gone. What are we predicting for the new Greek government vis-a-vis Macedonia?
I mean, I'm not getting my hopes up. Obviously, Mitsotakis insisted that the deal was already passed by the previous government. He pours scorn on them, but then he stops short when asked if he can unravel the deal, end the deal with hopefully Mitsotakis and Mitsotakis in Macedonia. That would be like a great tag team if those two get together and begin undoing Prespa. But so far, Mitsotakis is saying no, that he will not do this. He will just start some major campaign to promote Greek Macedonia as the only true and rightful Macedonia in the whole world. And but then he would not object to our joining NATO. But the rest of the deal could unravel even without him, because
it's too late for that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're essentially hoping on Turkey at this point, if we're hoping for this. I mean, I'm on two minds if you even want this to unravel, or it could even be funnier if we join NATO and then the deal unravels, because just imagine the butthurt on the Greek side if this would happen.
Yeah.
The way the deal unravels would be with EU accession talks. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, I think, and I do think, I was thinking about this morning actually at the gym. It was nice to get back to the gym after 3 weeks. the so-called Prespa agreement is going to be undone incrementally. There's not going to be one fell swoop that just shoots it down. That's just not possible. It's going to be done incrementally and over time, and there's going to be a lot of bitter wailing and gnashing of teeth amongst more of the Europeans than the Americans, and certainly Zoran Zaev and the colorful revolutionaries, etc. But it's going to be undone incrementally, and again, as Mitsotakis has said in the past, they reserve the right to veto any part of the EU accession talks with Macedonia if and when they begin. We should point out, and Bulgaria as well has said the same thing, and etc. So we'll see on that. But I want to go back to one thing about Cyprus and the elections. And James Kerr-Lindsay, one of the think tankers out there from the UK, from London School of Economics, who's very much pro-Greek and anti-Macedonia and pro-quote-unquote North Macedonia, etc. He's a quote-unquote citizen of the world. He tweeted out on July 7, quote, "Whatever one thinks of his domestic record, Alexis Tsipras leaves office with genuine respect on the international stage. His courage in securing the Prespa agreement with quote-unquote North Macedonia has helped bring some much-needed stability in the Balkans and improved Greece's standing." And this just speaks to these people who are quote-unquote citizens of the world. So he says Cyprus has a better record on the international stage than the domestic stage. And yet in a sovereign country, the leaders that are elected are supposed to represent the interests of their domestic, of their citizens, of the domestic audience, not the internationals. And this is where the thinking is all backwards with our international friends who think they are citizens of the world. And it's just kind of, okay, well, fine. He's got respect on the international stage. Great. He's going to have to go get a job at some think tank in Brussels or Washington or New York or whatever. But he certainly didn't serve the interests of the Greek people, just as Zaev doesn't serve the interests of the Macedonian people. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that. But yeah, in terms of what this means for Macedonia, it's too early to tell. I think you're right. They're just they just got their cabinet sworn in today. The new foreign minister, who is the new
He's been obviously critic of the deal, but he also said that he would respect the deal, so he would refer to us to North Macedonia, not Skopje or Fyromians, or one of those versions they were using in the past. Just notice how these guys like James Kerr-Lindsay, they're quickly now painting Tsipras as a populist. You could see this, I don't know, in Nicholas Burns as well. So this was not mentioned for a long time. Obviously Tsipras was a populist for leftist revolutionary for like 6 months. Then he got his ass handed to him by Merkel, and he was a quiet little obedient center-left politician for the rest of his term. And he did this thing. He created the backlash in which, if you notice, there's no more Golden Dawn in Greece, there's no more openly Nazi party in Greece. Those votes went somewhere, and, I have a very good idea where they went. They went into the new government, into the conservative government, which opposed the name deal. So essentially, there is a very strong, very outspoken, Balkan-style nationalist movement within New Democracy. But all of a sudden, now Tsipras is the populist. He was in the first 6 months of his term, and now in the last 5 minutes of his term. Even though he was touted as a very solid leader of the social democratic wing in the European Parliament, he was endorsed by them. So nothing. He was not part of the loony left in Europe. So he was very completely co-opted by the center left. And now all of a sudden, Mitsotakis, who wins on this backlash against Prespa, which I'm hopeful and pretty certain we'll see in Macedonia as well. All of a sudden, Mitsotakis is, everybody's touting his American-educated pedigree, and the economic reforms. The Greek stock exchange index went up by a few points. So this is all a reformist Greek prime minister in the making. And to be fair, his family was undone by the nationalists. He's not their first choice. But to win this type of elections in Greece with this majority, obviously he made a big tent on the right, and this obviously includes the rabidly nationalist Greeks who hate Macedonia, hate Turkey, hate Albanians, hate Bulgarians, hate everybody around them. So, okay, but, they they have their narrative, they have their talking orders. Tsipras was a populist, and the new guy is a center-right figure. Good luck with that. Let's see how that works out for them.
Well, yeah, remains to be seen how that unfolds in the coming weeks and months ahead. But let's switch slightly to European Union horse trading. So, and I'm really rusty on this, Cvetin, because I've been just trying to keep up with Macedonia and local news and whatnot. So, but who's going to be the new Juncker and Mogherini and Tusk? What have we got there?
Well, the liquor cabinet keys from Juncker, they were passed on to this mother of seven German conservative, moderate conservative, seen as widely unsuccessful German defense minister. You remember all those jokes about the German military not functioning? Well, that was her.
Yes.
Her refusal to spend more money for defense. Okay, that's also her. But okay, I mean,
mother of seven. You said?
Yeah.
Okay, good for her. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting family.
You have to import foreign immigrants to do your work if you're having 7 children. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure she imported her share of nannies, but I mean, good for her. She had to flee the Baader Meinhof in the UK to avoid being killed by them. So she must have been doing something right, or her father in any case. When she was a child, she had to flee the country. All good on this front. Vemera celebrated here. They said, okay, we liked her. The previous guy, the guy who could have won, Manfred Weber. He was openly hostile to Orban and openly friendly with Mitsotakis. So I had a bad feeling about him. So okay, this is not the worst thing they could have done. About time Germany takes some actual direct responsibility for that shit show they have running there in Brussels. There is an interesting socialist again running the foreign policy, but this time it's a Spanish guy who is a Catalan but opposes secession for Catalonia. So he also opposes Kosovar independence as such, because Spain has this funny arrangement against Kosovo being independent. So he sparked a fight between Bulgaria and Serbia, in which Bulgaria calls on the new Mogherini, this fat Spanish Catalan guy, to recognize Kosovo immediately, and Serbia tells Bulgaria to watch, mind your own business. And we have a very interesting dynamic here. Who else is there? We have the other guys are
just
not
to be clear. So the new EU foreign minister, quote unquote, is I'm not sure, Josep Borrell.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So, and he's from the Party of European Socialists.
Yeah, he's the socialist Spanish.
Yeah, but interesting that he's a Catalan opposed to Catalonian independence, and so how that plays in with the whole Kosovo and Serbia issue will be fun to watch.
Yeah, Catalan anti-secessionist caused the fight between Serbia and Bulgaria. Truly, we live in magnificent times. And we almost got a Macedonian as an actual ethnic Macedonian, born in Aegean Macedonia in Greece. We almost got him as president of the European Parliament, Sergei Stanishev, the ridiculously corrupt Bulgarian socialist, who is actually Macedonian. We have a few Macedonian members of European Parliament, like this socialist lady from Slovenia, or who else was there? I think some of the Bulgarians are also actually Macedonians. And we almost got Stanishev, who is a Russian Assad, actual one, not like Zaev, who now points fingers at everybody and says, you work for Russia, and you work for Russia. Stanishev actually, he was born in the Soviet Republic of Ukraine, in some intelligence or diplomatic family. So obviously he is a Russian Assad, no doubt about it. And he was rumored to be the next president of the European Parliament in this horse trading they made, but they eventually went for another guy because they realized he's too corrupt and he's got a bunch of corruption scandals around him. But we could have had a Macedonian Speaker of the European Parliament. That would have been interesting.
Yeah.
And that would. I was joking that, listen, just look at this guy, read his biography, check out the scandals he's been accused of, and then just imagine how much better it will be when we actually join the European Union as Macedonia proper, and we got plenty of these guys around here, and we can do so much more damage from the inside of the EU once we join. And actually, this is where I am in my frame of mind right now. I mean, I would want the Prespa deal to get unraveled and Zaev gets what's coming to him, etc. Mm-hmm. But it's actually even very funny that, imagine we join NATO and even the EU, and then people like Sergei Stanishev and Zoran Zaev are appointed to positions of some influence. We will very quickly tell everybody, that France was right to block us, to refuse to allow us to join the European Union. I mean, if you're just following things, we are in a situation where Britain is pushing very hard for us to join, almost openly on the pretext that Macedonian membership, Albanian membership, Serbian membership undermines, weakens the EU, dilutes it, brings all these countries into the European Union, while France is opposing this because they want to preserve some semblance of propriety and rules and rule of law and order, and enough of these Balkan gangsters already in Brussels. It's glorious.
Yeah, well, to be honest, when Macron speaks about the dysfunction within the European Union and how it needs severe reform before they can even talk about enlargement, he's correct. It is a mess. Whether or not they can possibly reform themselves, I doubt, because it's just too big. And Macron, of course, and people like him want to create the United States of Europe, a large, vast federal bureaucracy with a center, Brussels, that is unaccountable to the individual nation states and the people that make up the individual nation states. So, to your point about Britain and their desire to see all these countries come in, and then basically it kind of tears the European Union apart. That might be correct. It will be interesting. We'll do another podcast later this month when Boris Johnson becomes the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who will take Britain out of the European Union by October 31, come hell or high water. Now, just to the point we were talking about, the various new European Union leaders, they assume office on November 1. So that's going to be a very interesting time to watch politics in Europe. If Britain leaves on October 31 and these gals, Ursula von der Leyen, the new president of the European Commission, take office on November 1. Anyway, never a dull moment within European politics for those of us crazy enough to follow it. But
no, this is getting really crazy here.
It is. I want to kind of go back to, you mentioned you managed to get Bulgaria in there, and in the opening monologue we talked a little bit about Bulgaria and Goce Delchev and Boyko Borisov, the current Prime Minister of Bulgaria, and his foreign minister and others who are continuing to pile on the pressure and insist that Macedonia recognize Goce Delchev as a Bulgarian. And this is going to be one of their, Zoran Zaev signed a quote-unquote friendship treaty with Bulgaria, and so if you want to be our friends, you've got to do what we say, which of course is ridiculous. But anyway, and then we have the U.S. Embassy stunt, in which I guess it was July 3rd is when the embassy had their Independence Day party.
Mm-hmm.
And so my understanding, and I didn't actually see it, but I read a little bit about it. Tamara Todevska, who was in the Eurovision Song Contest, sang the national anthem, but left out Goce Delchev, Peter Gulli, Ahmet Grove, and Yanis Sandansky. And I know the U.S. Embassy then issued a non-apology apology on Twitter, which was ratioed. What other fallout from that event do you have?
Tamara did this to herself, honestly. She had the... she was, as we discussed here at length, the face of North Macedonia, of trying to promote the name North Macedonia internationally, and basically her entire Eurovision Song Contest campaign was focused and subverted to this goal. Whereas other Eurovision performers would always insist to say Macedonia, would get into a fight with the speakers, commentators there. Tamara is obviously the first Eurovision contender who, after the imposed name change, but she could have still pushed back like Stoyan Stoilov said during the victory at the handball championship. No, she said Nord this, Nord that. She loved using the N-word throughout the campaign, and a lot of people were rubbed raw by this. There was an attempt to organize, to like fake a euphoric welcoming reception for her in Skopje, at the Skopje airport. It failed miserably. There were 20 people there, half of them government ministers, whereas obviously the handball team who said, no, it's Republic of Macedonia, never Nord, they were welcomed by 100,000 people at the square. So she should have taken a hint. She then sang at the Pride Parade. Okay, no big deal. She supports this cause, but again, not many people took offense with this. It was mostly the biggest issue was where a few participants at this parade, they made the mistake to get out of the majority Macedonian part of the city into the majority Albanian village of Sarai and got themselves beaten up because, this is the actual place where you actually have homophobia, not in the urban Macedonian parts of the city. Right. Never mind. She was the face of this campaign as well. And then within this environment we have with Bulgaria, she goes out to the US Embassy. The US Embassy is wholeheartedly endorsing Tamara as their face, as they actually had the previous contestant in Eurovision. She was actually the daughter of Ambassador Bailey's chief political advisor here. So they have, obviously the US Embassy has decided that this is their way to win hearts and minds in Macedonia with this, with the Eurovision Song Contest. Good luck with that. Honestly, you will need it. And she omits to mention Goce Delchev. At the time where we're developing this same back and forth with Bulgaria as we had with Greece over the name, we are not a party to the dispute with Bulgaria as we were not party to the dispute with Greece. This is very important to understand. We are an object. We are the MacGuffin in this story. We do not have our own role to play in the dispute. Actually, it's a dispute between the Bulgarian left and the Bulgarian right. And the Bulgarian right sees the left gaining on them dangerously. Mm-hmm. They lost the presidential elections. Rumen Radev is a popular president of the country. Boyko Borisov feels that he is trampling on his turf. So he came up with this narrative that we Macedonians, the MacGuffin, humiliated Bulgaria horribly by proposing that we celebrate the day when the bones of Goce Delchev were brought from Sofia to Skopje to be buried in the capital of independent Macedonia in 1946. And this was done by the Bulgarian Communist Party. They probably had some idea that this will help create a positive back and forth between Macedonians and Bulgarians. As everybody was remaking the Balkans after the Second World War, they were hoping maybe that they will gain Macedonia in this exchange as maybe like a enlarged socialist republic of Vardar Macedonia and Pirin Macedonia, possibly. It was maybe it could have worked out well for Macedonians as well, just to have Vardar and Pirin parts together. I assume this was part of the idea. It obviously backfired as Tito lost his working relationship with Stalin because he was too independently minded. Let's not go too deep into the weeds here. But the point is that Borisov sees an opening to attack the Socialist Party of Bulgaria, accusing them, you were the idiots who returned the bones of Goce Delchev to the Macedonians, and they disrespect us. This was the height of national treason, which you did in 1946. We are not party to this dispute. We have no say in this. This is a fight between the two Bulgarian parties. And as a result, we could get blocked from joining the European Union, or we could have a fight when we go visit Bulgaria, which we often do happily and with a lot of goodwill. But this is how this dispute is performed. It was an internal dispute between the left and the right in Greece. Now it's an internal dispute between the left and right in Bulgaria. And Tamara was stupid enough to walk right into it.
I like the way you describe that as MacGuffin, which here says, quote, is an object, device, or event that is necessary to the plot and the motivation of the characters, but insignificant, unimportant, or irrelevant in itself. And so That's how Bulgaria treats Macedonia. Insignificant, unimportant, and irrelevant. But necessary for them, as you point out.
Yeah, for Bulgaria and Serbia in Greece, we are
A thing, an object.
a useful talking point in their internal political arguments. So when Samaras wants to bring down the older Mitsotakis, he evokes Macedonia and stuff like that. For Albania, on the other hand, we are actually a potential territorial conquest or expansion, and what Greece and Bulgaria are doing to us is weakening, undermining our Macedonian identity and unity, which we sorely need to keep Albanian nationalism in check, which is the one which could actually have explosive power in the region. And they're undermining us just for a few points on their own domestic polling when they fight the other party. And Nikola Gruevski, had a magnificent response to this from Budapest. He actually told the Bulgarians, you could be doing this much smarter. You're doing this. We are not obviously on the Vemera side, on the conservative side. If in the old political division of Macedonia, the right was always seen as closer to Bulgaria, and the left was closer to Serbia because the communism came here with Serbian bayonets essentially. But you have to. He's honestly in a good-fated attempt explaining to Bulgaria that they're actually burning the reservoirs of goodwill among Macedonians by being such bullies and pushing so hard on this issue, while the Serbs have always been more like, we're brothers, we recognize you as a separate nation. Like hell they do. They were actually trying to dictate our economic and foreign policy, but they're much smarter in their approach to Macedonia, whereas Bulgarians are now being completely intrusive and offensive, frankly. And Gruevski really had a very smart comment in this line that you should be doing this differently. You catch more flies with honey was essentially his comment on the matter.
Right. Well, and going back to what you said about identity, and we've talked about this before on the podcast. I've written about it. Others have said it. That it is vital for regional stability and regional security that Macedonia have a strong identity, because that's what keeps the country intact. And that's what keeps, and if the country is intact and has a strong identity, then that keeps others, neighbors, as you point out, from being tempted to do whatever they need to do for territorial conquest or conquest of other means. And that is where, I go back to the my opening monologue and say that the U.S. bureaucrats are not it's in U.S. interests to see a very strong Macedonia with a strong national identity. But they are working against that, ironically, and yet I'm not sure if they're too stupid to understand that, or too ignorant, or don't care. Ultimately, of course, the individual U.S. bureaucrats within the U.S. Embassy there in Skopje and the State Department and around the world, they're all interested in their own personal prestige, power, etc. They're not terribly interested even in U.S. interest or anything like that, which is, they're interested in their careers. But going back to what we were just talking about, it is vital for Macedonia and for the region to have a strong Macedonia, and a strong Macedonia is predicated upon a strong Macedonian national identity.
Sure, it's basic physics.
Exactly. Yes. It's in human nature 101. So.
Yeah, if we leave this in vacuum, somebody's going to move in and fill it in, and I'm no longer able or prepared to subscribe U.S. foreign policy moves to stupidity. We've certainly told them so many times in plain English, personally, through Twitter, through this podcast. Mm-hmm. They know what they're doing. We have a visitor here a few days ago. Elliot Engel, the main
sure.
promoter of the Albanian national cause in the House of Representatives. The new ambassador, Katie Burns, just arrived here. She was in Greece. She knows, I mean, they know what they're doing. She was sent off by Phil Ricker and by Jess Bailey from DC. Mm-hmm. I mean, going back to Ricker's involvement with supporting essentially Albanian nationalism when he came here first with Chris Hill. And it's very difficult not to say that the U.S. Has taken a side here. I understand that there are different competing interests in DC, but this particular group is especially involved in dealing with the Balkans. Maybe other interests are not so involved. Maybe we need to pay them. Maybe we need to entice them somehow to come here. Maybe we should give them 100,000 euros, like to Patriarch Bartholomew. But I mean, honestly, they know what they're doing. They're doing this with. They endorsed. They never criticize Albania. They never criticize whatever they're doing. Actually, they support coming up with all sorts of conspiracy theories for the 2001 war, for the Kumanov attack. I mean, they know what they're doing. Let's kid ourselves.
Yeah, and the frankly, I think the criminal thing is that we can talk about the deep state, the permanent state, the managerial state, whatever you want to call it, but this is evidence of those things. I call it the administrative state, in that they are working in direct opposition to the current administration, the administration of President Donald Trump, who speaks, whatever his faults, he talks about sovereignty of the individual nation states that make up the planet, and how the individual nation, we, the United States, will not interfere. Granted, of course, we do in many different ways, but in this case, obviously, we should be staying the hell out of Macedonia's internal affairs. But that's exactly what the State Department and the U.S. Embassy and others are doing. Anyway, we've talked about that as well in the past, and we'll talk about it as long as we have breath, I am sure. And moving on, let us talk about our farmers' picks now. Cvetin, do you have a farmer's pick for this week?
Honestly, we've had a break of, what's it now, like 2.5 weeks maybe, and I don't know where to begin. I tweeted once that we could have easily done 8 podcasts, and I don't know where to begin, so I'll just throw a few things out there. I can put links to articles, and you can just pick it apart. I mean, these are all things we didn't have time to mention in the podcast so far. So we have a top official of the government who is albino, which is not necessarily important for the story, but it adds comical relief here. Who turns out to be racist, who was recorded during a meeting explaining, discussing the inferiority of the peoples who live south of the equator, and they're all, he calls them gypsies, like us. So this is maybe his saving grace, because he says that we are gypsies, just like everybody living south of the equator, and he calls the Italians. He uses this slur for the Italians mostly. He's in hot water because he is. The tapes reveal him to be apparently a corrupt person. They're discussing a procurement of 7.7 million euros. But Zaev, don't worry, Zaev came out to defend him, and Zaev said, no, nobody discusses a corruption scandal. Nobody asks for a bribe when he's sitting with 7 other people. So this was Zaev's defense. And, Zaev should know, because he's the expert here. Exactly. I mean, when Zaev is recorded discussing a bribe, he's only tete-a-tete. It's only 2 of them there. Right. So then we have our friend Mind Plumber, Van Jordanovsky, Sasha Jordanovsky's brother. Yeah. My God, he's a lawyer who is close to Zaev, to the whole color revolution thing. He all of a sudden comes out and accuses Van Jordanovsky of taking a bribe through his IT company worth 350,000 euros from this infamous innovation fund, right, which essentially, if you're a friend of the guy who runs it, he apparently gives you money. He gave money to the wife of a prominent journalist, Goran Mihailovsky. He gave money to Branko Gerovsky's newspaper before Branko Gerovsky turned on SDSM, on Zaev. He gave money to a member of the parliament from Zaev's party. He gave money, obviously, to Goce and Delchev, etc. This huge scandal. So then we are now, everybody's asking what was actually the deal with Van Jordanovsky, and somebody comes out and finds the project he applied with, and there are pictures of a device for measuring air pollution he allegedly invented, and he should be taking money for this. I assume this is what he got the money for, the 350,000 euros for, and you just do a reverse Google image search on the device, and you realize that it's actually made in India. Some Indian company is making this, but somebody from this company which is applying for this project, they erased they airbrushed the name of the Indian company from the device, and they're passing it off as their own.
Oh my God.
So,
amateur hour.
My God. And then both these scandals, when they showed up, they superseded the major scandal we actually have, which Gerovsky is revealing. And this is the Boki 13 scandal. So we have this flamboyant LGBT person. No,
he or she or it or whatever it is.
Did you honestly miss this scandal while you were hiking and swimming?
I missed it.
Oh God, my God.
maybe it's better that way. No, maybe I've been spared.
No. I don't know. This is why I said we need a daily podcast. So they actually give a complete new meaning to the term "gay mafia." Apparently, he's tied up with Alexander Kyriakos from the deposed high-ranking SDSM official, and they were allegedly racketeering businessmen, hotel owners, Vomero-era mayors, threatening them that they're going to use wiretaps from Katica Yaneva's cash against them because, you know, we have the goods on you. You better pay up unless you want these wiretaps to go leak somewhere. And Gerovsky is using all these code names for Kyriakos, for Boki 13, but ultimately Boki owned up that he is the one being mentioned. Gerovsky used Koki for Boki and Kiki for Kyriakos, so no points there for guessing who's who.
Not very creative.
So we have corruption scandals, literally, we don't have the time to just process all of this.
Right. Wow.
It's a glorious period here.
Well, we'll throw up maybe some links to that, to the things you mentioned, some of the others. Yeah. So my farmer's pick actually, normally Cvetin, I like to end on a high note, talking about tourism, food and wine, beautiful places in Macedonia, things like that. And this week, I just have to really call out, and I think we'll include the video at the end of this podcast. The U.S. Embassy put out a video introducing the new U.S. ambassador, who I understand arrived today, and I'm going to, because she likes, and I think goes out of her way to use the term North Macedonia, quote unquote, I'm going to deliberately mispronounce her name from now on for the rest of my life, as Katie Burness, who is the new U.S. ambassador to Macedonia. But she put out, the State Department put out a video with her and her husband, and again, in the video, I think she, it's almost parody. And it's just inane and stupid, and it's well scripted. It's not even creative, to be honest with you. But she goes out of her way, or the writers go out of their way to make sure that she says North Macedonia as many times as possible. Doesn't even talk about the it's perfectly acceptable. The U.S. Embassy even admits it's perfectly acceptable to talk about the Macedonian people and Macedonian culture and Macedonian food and Macedonian wine, etc. But she and the writers deliberately go out of their way to say North Macedonia over and over and over again, and talk about cultural landmarks and things like that without really talking about the spiritual heritage of Macedonia as a Christian landmark and things of that nature. So anyway, we'll put that up, the video introducing the new U.S. ambassador, Katie Burness, and we'll end the podcast with that.
Oh, I mean, it's all those videos, they look like a hostage video, honestly. But we had this famous tennis player, Novak Djokovic, the Serbian guy, and he loves, he knows Macedonian songs, blah, blah. Oh, yeah. He's doing an Instagram live stream, and he's singing Makedonsko Device, and he says to my friends in Macedonia, he doesn't say North Macedonia. And Zaev writes a Facebook comment, "Thank you, Novak, we love you, you're always welcome here in North Macedonia." So he literally had to, you can just tell that the whole purpose of Zaev writing to Novak is to correct him in using Macedonia instead of North Macedonia.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, Zaev, shut up, man. Like we do this a lot now. Like I think like every second day you just go out and say like, dude, just stop talking.
Yeah.
Just
Save
shut up, please.
Yeah, you do yourself a favor if you just shut your mouth. But yeah. Again,
My God,
another example of people going out of their way to say "quote unquote" North Macedonia when they don't have to, but for whatever reason, I guess it's part of the
so annoying.
Part of the script, part of the approved narrative, as I've written about. So anyway, we're running long.
So
Cvetin and I have to go to the office because I do have a day job, which I get paid for. I don't get paid for this. Neither do you. So
yeah, not yet, at least not by the Russians.
Exactly. So
in any case,
yeah, there we go.
Well,
so.
But we gotta keep this up now. We're wasting so much material.
Oh, I know.
When we take a break.
We'll get back on our regular schedule. So anyway,
Absolutely.
great talking to you.
You too, buddy. Take care.